10 years without a single promotion. 10 years being called their reliable foundation. 10 years putting out fires while never being handed the match. But in year 11, when a $7 million contract came knocking, it didn't ask for the executives, it asked for me. And for the first time in my career, I didn't step aside. My name is Claire Monroe, and I've been invisible for 3,852 days. That's how long I've sat at the same desk on the 14th floor of Redwell Partners' Denver office, watching the city skyline change while my career remained frozen in amber. Senior Strategy Specialist, a title that sounds important until you realize it's corporate speak for too valuable to fire, too forgettable to promote. I arrived here at 29, fresh-faced and foolish enough to believe that hard work spoke louder than office politics. Now, at 39, I've become furniture. Reliable furniture that never breaks, never complains, and apparently never deserves more than a 2% annual raise while inflation eats away at my purchasing power. The irony isn't lost on me that I've trained 7 people who now outrank me. Marcus Chen, no relation, started as an intern I mentored 5 years ago. He's a VP now, corner office with the mountain view. Tyler Brooks couldn't format a PowerPoint when I taught him our systems. He made senior director last spring. Even Jackson Cole, who once asked me how to calculate ROI, just got promoted to partner after presenting my strategic framework as his own innovation. But I'm not bitter. Bitterness implies caring, and caring implies hope. I've evolved past both. My salary sits 25% below market rate for my experience. I know because I've done the research, created the spreadsheets, analyzed the data, the same analytical skills that make me indispensable for special projects and crisis management somehow vanish during performance reviews. Mira Tate, my direct supervisor, always has the same feedback. You're doing great, Claire. Just keep being that rock we can count on. A rock, that's what I am. Rocks don't get promoted, they get stepped on. I handle the work no one else wants, the Byzantine internal strategy audits, the client recovery missions when accounts go sideways, the 11 p.m. emergency presentations that save million-dollar deals. My fingerprints are on every major win this office has had in the past decade, buried in the appendices and footnotes where no one looks. Last week, I found myself excluded from the strategic planning meeting for Q3, a meeting about initiatives I'd outlined in a memo 2 months prior. I learned about my exclusion when someone accidentally included me in a calendar decline. Sorry, Claire, keeping this one small. The note read, small meant important. Small meant visible. Small meant not for Claire. The worst part isn't the exclusion, it's the assumption that I'll keep performing regardless, that I'll continue being their safety net, their insurance policy, their reliable foundation while they build their careers on my blueprints. And they're right. Because what choice do I have? Start over at 40? Compete with hungry 20-somethings at a new firm? So I sit at my desk, I do my work, and I perfect the art of professional invisibility. Some days, I wonder if I could simply stop showing up and see how long it takes anyone to notice. But mostly, I just count 3,652 days and counting. The cracks in my carefully constructed numbness appeared on a Tuesday morning that smelled like burnt coffee and broken promises. I'd spent 3 months architecting the Meridian Healthcare proposal, a complex restructuring strategy that would streamline their supply chain and save them $12 million annually. Every model, every projection, every innovative solution bore my intellectual DNA. I'd worked weekends, sacrificed sleep, turned their chaos into a symphony of efficiency. The presentation to Meridian's board was scheduled for 10 a.m. At 9:47, I received a Teams message from Mira. Hey Claire, slight change. Jackson will be leading the presentation. You've done amazing work. Just sit tight and we'll loop you in after. Loop me in after. After Jackson claimed my work. After he stumbled through my carefully crafted talking points. After he accepted the congratulations and the bonus and the visibility that comes with landing a $3.2 million contract. I watched from my desk as the conference room filled with partners and senior leadership. Through the glass walls, transparent barriers that might as well be concrete for people like me, I saw Jackson fumbling with my slides. He'd changed the template to match his personal brand colors. That was his contribution. New colors. The meeting ended at 11:30. The partners shook Jackson's hand. Mira beamed like a proud mentor. At 11:47, I received an email, CC'd to what felt like half the company. Team, thrilled to announce Jackson Cole's incredible win with Meridian Healthcare. His innovative approach and strategic thinking exemplify the Redwell partners' difference. Drinks. Thursday to celebrate. Buried in the email thread, 7 messages down. Thanks to Claire Monroe for her support materials. Support materials. 3 months of my life reduced to 2 words. I confronted Mira that afternoon. Not aggressively, I'd learned that aggression from women over 35 was labeled difficult or not a team player. I simply asked why the plan had changed. Jackson needs the visibility for his partner track, she explained, stirring her third latte of the day. You understand, right? Besides, you need to work on your executive presence. Maybe if you were more assertive? Visible? You can't expect to advance by hiding behind spreadsheets. Claire. Hiding. As if I chose invisibility. As if I hadn't volunteered for every high-profile project only to be relegated to back-end support. As if my voice hadn't been systematically edited out of every important conversation for a decade. That evening, I attended the Q3 promotions meeting. Attended is generous. I was invited 3 minutes before it started. Barely enough time to grab my laptop and sprint to conference room B. My name wasn't on the agenda. I knew this because I'd helped prepare the agenda. We're promoting based on leadership potential and strategic vision, the managing partner announced. The list included Jackson, of course, Tyler Brooks, Jennifer Martinez, who'd been here 2 years, Marcus Lynn, another of my former mentees. When they asked for questions, I raised my hand. What about senior specialists who've been here longer? What's the pathway for advancement? The room fell silent. The kind of silence that tells you you've asked the wrong question at the wrong time. We evaluate each case individually, the managing partner said, already looking at his phone. Let's take that offline. Offline. Where inconvenient questions go to die. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I opened a document and titled it, The Receipts. For 4 hours, I documented every project I'd saved, every crisis I'd managed, every innovation I'd created that someone else had claimed. 10 years of invisible excellence, finally made visible, if only to me. The Hartman Group Crisis, 2019. My solution saved a $5 million account. Brad Williams got promoted. The Digital Transformation Framework, 2020. My design. Mira's presentation. Her senior director title, The Pacific Northwest Expansion Strategy, 2021. My research and models, Jackson's vision. 23 other instances, each meticulously documented. As I typed, something shifted. The numbness cracked wider, and underneath, I found something I'd buried. Rage, clean, clarifying rage. I looked at my salary history. 10 years of 2-3% raises while inflation averaged 3.5%. The math was simple. I'd been taking a pay cut every year for a decade. Meanwhile, LinkedIn showed Jackson's promotion announcement, his 4th in 6 years. At 2 a.m., I closed the document and stared at my reflection in the black computer screen. The woman looking back wasn't broken. She was done. The next morning, I walked into Redwell Partners with the same invisible stride I'd perfected over 3,753 days. But something had changed. The cracks had become fault lines. I was still counting days. But now, I was counting down. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. 3 days after I'd documented my decade of professional invisibility, it handed me Rebecca Lorne. The email landed in my inbox at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. That dead zone when real decision-makers have already started their weekends. Mira forwarded it without context. Claire, handle this. Initial contact only. If they're serious, Loop in Jackson's team, Monday. Granix Corporation, a medical device manufacturing giant seeking strategic consulting for their East Coast expansion. Revenue, $2.8 billion. Potential contract value, unknown. Priority level, low enough to dump on Claire Monroe at 4:47 on a Friday. I almost laughed. Almost. Rebecca Lorne, their CFO, had specifically requested a preliminary call at 5:30 p.m. Most of my colleagues would have pushed back, rescheduled for Monday, established dominance through calendar politics. But I'd learned that sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as inconveniences. Ms. Monroe? Her voice was crisp, tired, and unmistakably skeptical when we connected. I'll be honest, we've interviewed 6 consulting firms this month. They all sent men in identical suits with identical PowerPoints promising identical transformations. Tell me why I shouldn't hang up right now. Something about her directness cut through my professional autopilot. Because you called me at 5:30 on a Friday, which means you're either desperate or done with the usual dance. Either way, you don't have time for bullshit, and neither do I. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, a laugh. Go on. For the next 2 hours, we dissected Granix's challenges, not the surface-level symptoms every consultant could spot, but the underlying fractures in their operational philosophy. Rebecca had an engineer's mind trapped in a CFO's role. She thought in systems and outcomes, not politics and presentations. Your East Coast expansion isn't failing because of market conditions, I told her, pulling up data I'd absorbed from a similar project 3 years ago. It's failing because you're trying to transplant West Coast operational DNA without adapting to East Coast regulatory metabolism. You need a translation layer, not a transformation. Interesting metaphor, she said. Explain. So I did. Without slides, without jargon, without the desperate peacocking that characterized most initial client calls. I gave her what I'd learned from 10 years of solving problems no one else wanted to touch. Unfiltered expertise. You're not like the others, Rebecca said finally. The men who pitched us spent 40 minutes telling us how impressive they were. You've spent 2 hours telling me how my business actually works. I'm nobody important, I replied, the truth sliding out before I could stop it. Just the person who does the real work. Another pause. I need to discuss this with my CEO. But Ms. Monroe, Claire, I want to continue this conversation. With you. Specifically you. The call ended at 7:43 p.m. The office was empty except for security and the ghosts of my ambitions. I sat in the growing darkness, Rebecca's words echoing. Specifically, you. Monday morning arrived with Mira's predictable response to my call summary. Great work warming them up. Claire, I'll have Jackson take it from here. Can you brief him on the technical details? Actually, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. Rebecca Lorne requested to continue working with me directly. Mira's smile tightened. I'm sure she was being polite. Granix is potentially huge. We need senior leadership on this. Of course, I agreed, my tone professionally neutral. I'll send Jackson my notes. But I didn't. Instead, I sent Rebecca Lorne a direct email from my personal account. Rebecca, I wanted to follow up on our conversation. As discussed, I see 3 critical leverage points in your expansion strategy. I've attached a preliminary framework, not a PowerPoint, just a working document. My corporate email is monitored and filtered. If you'd like to continue our discussion without intermediaries, I'm available. It was a breach of protocol. It was probably career suicide. It was the first authentic professional move I'd made in years. Rebecca responded within an hour. Claire, your framework addresses issues our internal team hasn't even articulated yet. I'm sharing this with our CEO. Question, are you available for a direct meeting Wednesday? Just you, myself, and David Sterling, our CEO, no suits, no slides, just strategy. My heart hammered as I typed, absolutely. Tuesday crawled by. I submitted mundane reports, attended meaningless meetings, Perfected my invisibility act while something electric hummed beneath my skin. I told no one about Wednesday's meeting. That evening, I prepared differently than I ever had before. No PowerPoint, no talking points approved by committee. Just my accumulated knowledge, organized and weaponized. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't preparing someone else's victory. I was preparing my own. Wednesday morning, I called in sick, the first time in 3 years. Mira barely acknowledged my absence. After all, rocks don't need sick days. But I wasn't being a rock anymore. My hands didn't shake as I entered the Granix building Wednesday morning. 10 years of being underestimated had taught me to hide every tell, every nerve, every flash of ambition that might mark me as a threat. David Sterling wasn't what I expected. No power suit, no commanding presence, just a tall, graying man in a cable-knit sweater who looked like he'd rather be debugging code than running a billion-dollar company. He stood when I entered, a gesture so simple and respectful that it caught me off guard. "Claire Monroe," he said, extending his hand. "Rebecca hasn't stopped talking about your insights since Friday. Please, sit. Coffee?" For the next 3 hours, we dove deep into Granix's expansion challenges. But this wasn't a typical client meeting. Sterling and Rebecca asked real questions, pushed back on my assumptions, and, most remarkably, listened. They treated me like what I'd never been at Redwell, an expert worth hearing. "Your framework," Sterling said, pulling up my document on his tablet. "It addresses integration issues we've been dancing around for months. How long have you been developing this approach?" 10 years, I said quietly. "I've been solving these kinds of problems for a decade. I just haven't been the one presenting the solutions." Rebecca and Sterling exchanged a look I couldn't read. "Tell me about Redwell Partners," Sterling said carefully. "Your role there." The truth came out in measured doses. The projects I'd saved but never claimed. The strategies I'd developed that wore other people's names. The systematic invisibility that had calcified around me like a shell. I kept my tone clinical, professional. Just the facts, no bitterness. "So you're saying," Rebecca summarized, "that Redwell would assign their most complex challenges to you, then hand the credit to someone else?" "I'm saying," I corrected, "that I've learned to solve problems from the shadows. It's given me a unique perspective on how organizational blind spots develop." Sterling leaned back, studying me. "We need more than a perspective, Claire. We need a complete operational overhaul for our East Coast division. New supply chain architecture, regulatory compliance framework, talent acquisition strategy, the works. Budget is $7 million over 3 years. $7 million. The number hung in the air like a challenge. "I can do it," I said. "I've actually already started mapping the regulatory landscape. Your biggest vulnerability isn't—" "Claire," Rebecca interrupted gently. "We know you can do it. The question is, will Redwell let you?" The meeting ended with a provisional agreement. Granix wanted a detailed proposal within 2 weeks. From me, personally. They'd wait to sign any contracts until they saw my work. I drove back to the office in a daze. $7 million. The largest contract in Redwell's Denver office history. And they wanted me. That evening, I worked late, legitimately this time, not performing busyness for an empty office. I pulled every relevant case study, every applicable framework, every lesson learned from a decade of invisible excellence, but I worked from my personal laptop, saving everything to my own cloud storage. A small rebellion, but mine. Thursday morning brought the inevitable summons to Mira's office. "Claire, I heard you met with Granix yesterday." Her smile was razor-sharp. "That was inappropriate. You know client interactions need to go through proper channels." "I was sick yesterday," I said evenly. "Must be a misunderstanding." Her eyes narrowed. "Jackson's team will take over any Granix communications moving forward. Send them everything you have." "Of course," I lied. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. Days belonged to Redwell, the same invisible work, the same dismissed contributions. But my nights and weekends belonged to the Granix proposal. I crafted something I'd never been allowed to create before, a strategy that bore my name. I incorporated insights from every project I'd touched, weaving together solutions I'd developed in obscurity. The proposal wasn't just a plan. It was my intellectual autobiography, proof of what I could do when the cage door cracked open. I also did something else during those 2 weeks. I consulted with an intellectual property attorney, a friend from college who'd watched my career stagnation with growing concern. If you develop this proposal on your own time, using your own resources, without using Redwell's proprietary information, she advised, it's yours. But document everything, every hour, every resource, every original thought. So I did. Timestamps, screenshots, a clear chain of creative custody that proved the proposal's DNA was mine alone. On the 14th day, I sent the completed proposal directly to Rebecca and Sterling. 47 pages of strategic architecture, financial modeling, and implementation roadmaps. My name on every page. Rebecca called within an hour. Claire, this is extraordinary. We want to move forward, with you leading the engagement. I'm flattered, I said, my heart pounding. But I should mention, Redwell Partners might have some opinions about that arrangement. Then perhaps, Sterling's voice joined the call. It's time to discuss your options. The cage door wasn't just cracked anymore, it was swinging wide open. And for the first time in 3,667 days, I was ready to walk through it. The email that changed everything arrived on a Monday morning at 8:47 a.m., while I was pretending to review Jackson's latest presentation, fixing his errors, as usual, without credit, as always. From David Sterling, CEO, Granix Corporation. To Mira Tate, Managing Director, Redwell Partners. CC, Senior Leadership Team, Redwell Partners, Claire Monroe. Subject, Partnership Agreement, Strategic Consulting Services. Dear Ms. Tate. Following extensive evaluation of multiple consulting firms, Granix Corporation has decided to move forward with a 3-year strategic consulting agreement valued at $7 million. Our decision is contingent upon one non-negotiable requirement. The project must be led by Ms. Claire Monroe, whose strategic vision and deep understanding of our operational challenges have proven exceptional. We request a meeting this Thursday to finalize contract details. Please confirm Ms. Monroe's availability to lead this engagement. Best regards, David Sterling. I watched the email explode across the office in real time. Mira's face went from confusion to disbelief to something approaching panic. Jackson practically sprinted to her office. The senior partners emerged from their morning meeting, phones buzzing with the news, $7 million, the largest contract in office history. With my name attached like a non-removable tag, Mira summoned me within minutes. This time, I wasn't alone. 3 senior partners flanked her desk like corporate antibodies responding to an infection. Claire, Mira began, her voice strained. This is wonderful news. Obviously, there's been some miscommunication with the client about reporting structures. You'll transition the relationship to Jackson's team, and we'll clarify. No. The word fell into the room like a stone into still water. I'd never said it before. Not to Mira, not to the partners, not to the system that had been feeding on my expertise for a decade. Excuse me? The senior partner, William Hayes, leaned forward. Ms. Monroe, perhaps you don't understand how we operate. I understand perfectly. I pulled out my phone, opening the email I drafted but never sent. I understand that I've generated over $23 million in revenue for this office over 10 years. I understand that my strategies have saved at least 7 major accounts. I understand that I've been paid 25% below market rate while training my own replacements. Claire, you're being emotional. Mira started. I'm being factual. I set a folder on her desk. This is my original Granix proposal, developed entirely outside of business hours, using my personal resources. My intellectual property attorney has already reviewed it. Granix hired me, not Redwell. If you'd like to be included in this contract, it will be under my terms. Hayes's face darkened. Are you threatening us? I'm negotiating, For the first time in 10 years, I'm actually negotiating. You're a senior strategy specialist. Another partner sputtered, You don't have the authority. Then give me the authority, I interrupted. Promote me to partner. Pay me market rate. Give me the team and resources I need. Or explain to the board how you lost a $7 million contract because you couldn't recognize the talent that's been carrying this office for a decade. The room fell silent. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, feel the tremor in my hands that I kept hidden under the table, but I didn't blink, didn't look away, didn't retreat into the comfortable invisibility that had been my shelter and my prison. This is extortion, Mira said quietly. This is business, I replied. The same business rules you've used to keep me in place while promoting everyone around me. The difference is, now I have leverage. Hayes stood abruptly. We need to discuss this. Claire, return to your desk. We'll have a decision by end of day. I spent the next 6 hours in a surreal limbo. Colleagues who'd never noticed me suddenly found reasons to walk past my desk. Jackson hovered nearby, his face a mixture of confusion and rage. The office buzzed with whispers, glances, the kind of attention I'd never wanted but now couldn't avoid. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang. Rebecca Lorne. Claire, I hope we haven't caused you any difficulties. That wasn't our intention. You gave me options, I said quietly. That's more than I've had in a decade. Good. Because if Redwell doesn't recognize your value, we have another proposal. A direct consulting agreement. You'd work with us independently. Same money, better terms, and Claire, you'd never be invisible again. I stared at my desk, at the coffee-stained mousepad I'd used for 5 years, at the windowless view I'd accepted as my lot. Can I have until tomorrow to decide? Of course. But Claire? Don't undervalue yourself again. We didn't choose you by accident. At 5:15 p.m., Mira appeared at my desk. Conference room A. The partners want to speak with you. I gathered my things, including my personal laptop and the box of items I'd quietly packed that morning. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't be returning to this desk the same way. The cage door wasn't just open now, it was hanging off its hinges, and everyone could hear the crash. The partners sat arrayed like judges at a tribunal, their faces carefully neutral. William Hayes centered himself as the voice of institutional authority, flanked by colleagues who'd never learned my last name until today. Ms. Monroe, Hayes began, his tone suggesting a prepared speech. We've reviewed your requests. While we appreciate your contributions to the firm, your approach today has been highly unprofessional. Threatening the partnership is not how we conduct. I resign. The words came out clear and calm, surprising even me. I'd walked into this room expecting a negotiation, a battle, maybe even a reluctant victory. But sitting across from these men who'd profited from my invisibility for a decade, I realized I didn't want their validation anymore. I wanted freedom. I'm sorry? Hayes blinked, his script suddenly useless. I resign, effective immediately. I pulled out my laptop. Accessing the resignation letter I drafted 2 weeks ago but never imagined sending. I'll email HR within the hour. As for the Granix contract, that was never Redwell's to lose. They hired me, not the firm. You can't simply walk out with a client, another partner interjected. There are non-compete clauses, which don't apply to clients I sourced independently, pursuing opportunities the firm explicitly told me to pass to others. I smiled, feeling a strange lightness. I've had a decade to read my contract. Have you? Mira finally spoke, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. Claire, you're making a mistake. You're throwing away your career over one contract. What happens when Granix ends? You'll be unemployable. I've been employed for 10 years, I replied, standing. I just haven't been valued. There's a difference. Hayes tried one last gambit. We could sue. Tortious interference, breach of fiduciary duty. You could, I agreed. And I could go public with a decade of documented wage discrimination, systematic exclusion from advancement opportunities, and intellectual property theft. I have 43 pages of evidence, time-stamped and verified. Would you like to see how that plays out in Discovery? The room fell silent. The corporate machinery that had ground me down for so long suddenly had nothing to grip. I'll clean out my desk now, I said, moving toward the door. I trust you'll handle my final paycheck appropriately. Oh, and gentlemen, you might want to ask Jackson how to calculate ROI. He never did quite master that. I left them sitting in their expensive silence and walked back to my desk for the last time. The office had gone quiet, that peculiar hush that follows corporate drama. I packed methodically, my coffee mug, my orthopedic keyboard rest, the small cactus that had survived 10 years of fluorescent lighting. Jackson appeared as I was sealing the box. "You screwed me," he hissed, keeping his voice low. "That contract was mine." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "It was mine. Just like the Meridian strategy was mine. Just like the Pacific Northwest expansion was mine. The only difference is, this time, everyone knows it." I picked up my box and walked toward the elevator. A few people nodded. Sarah from accounting, who'd always processed my expense reports without complaint. Jerome from IT, who'd helped me recover files after convenient system crashes. The invisible people, recognizing one of their own, breaking free. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of the 14th floor one last time. 10 years of my life, reduced to a view between closing metal doors. In the lobby, my phone buzzed. Rebecca Lorne. "I hear congratulations are in order," she said without preamble. "Or condolences, I'm not sure which applies to leaving Redwell." "Both," I said, stepping into the Denver afternoon sun. "Definitely both." "Well, when you're ready to discuss your consulting agreement with Granix, we're here. David's already approved the budget. $7 million, 3 years, and Claire, your name on everything." "Give me 24 hours, I said. "I need to remember how to be visible." That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop, drafting the framework for Monroe Strategic Consulting. My own firm, my own rules, my own name on the door. At 9 p.m., an email arrived from Mira. "Claire, I'm disappointed in how you handled this situation. You had such potential if you'd just been patient." I deleted it without responding. Patience was for people who believed the system would eventually work. I'd learned the system worked exactly as designed, just not for people like me. Another email, this one from Sarah in accounting. "About time. We always wondered when you'd stop letting them steal from you. Good luck." I raised my glass to the screen. Tomorrow, I'd start building something new. Tonight, I'd savor the sound of a cage door slamming shut behind me. From the inside, this time. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of Monroe Strategic Consulting's new office, a converted loft in Denver's Rhino District, all exposed brick and natural light. The Redwell building squatted in the distance, a glass monument to everything I'd left behind. My phone buzzed. Rebecca Lorne, now a trusted colleague rather than just a client. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "Just heard through the grapevine. Redwell lost 3 more senior strategists this quarter. Apparently, people started asking questions about advancement after you left." "I hope they find better answers than I did," I said, meaning it. My anger had metabolized into something more useful. Purpose. The Granix contract had exceeded every projection. What started as a $7 million engagement had expanded to include 2 subsidiary companies. But more importantly, it had become a proof of concept, evidence that excellence didn't require invisibility. "Oh, and Claire," Rebecca added, "we just got an email from Jackson Cole. He's exploring new opportunities and wanted to know if we need strategic consulting. I forwarded it to you." I laughed, really laughed. "Tell him I'm not hiring. Yet." The truth was, I was building carefully. My first hire had been Jerome from Redwell's IT department. Brilliant, overlooked, ready for someone to see his potential. Then Sarah from accounting, who turned out to have a gift for financial modeling that Redwell had never bothered to discover. One by one, I was assembling a team of formerly invisible talent. We worked differently here. No hierarchies designed to hide contribution, no stolen credit, no one sitting at the same desk for a decade wondering if they existed. Just good work, fairly attributed, properly compensated. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Marcus Lynn, not my former mentee, but a new graduate who'd found us through word of mouth, stuck his head in. Claire, the Morrison Industries team is here for the strategy session. Conference room? Living room, I corrected. That's what we called our meeting space, because business didn't have to feel like corporate theater. As I headed inside, I passed the framed email that started everything. David Sterling's message to Redwell, blown up poster size. My team had given it to me as a 3-month anniversary gift. The day visibility became non-negotiable. The plaque read, "The Morrison Industries meeting ran 2 hours. Unlike my decade at Redwell, I led it myself. No script, no handler, no invisible hand behind someone else's success." The client asked hard questions and got honest answers. When they left, they carried a proposal with my name on every page. That evening, as the team wrapped up, Jerome mentioned casually, "Heard Redwell's Denver office is restructuring. Lost too much talent, apparently." Talent was never their problem, I said. Recognition was. Later, alone in my office, I pulled up LinkedIn. Notifications I'd ignored for years suddenly mattered. Messages from former colleagues, industry connections. People who'd discovered I existed now that I'd stopped hiding. One message stood out. From Mira Tate. "Claire, I hope you're well. I've been reflecting on our time working together. If you ever want to discuss potential collaboration." I closed the message without responding. Some bridges, once burned, provided better light than passage. At precisely 6 p.m., I shut down my laptop. Another new rule. Success didn't require sacrificing evenings to prove dedication. As I gathered my things, I noticed the small cactus on my desk, the same one from Redwell, thriving now in real sunlight. The elevator in our building was old, manual, with an accordion gate that required deliberate action to close. I liked the metaphor. No automatic doors here. Every entrance and exit was a choice. Outside, Denver's evening light painted the city gold. My phone showed 17 new emails, 3 meeting requests, and a text from Rebecca. "Dinner Thursday? David wants to discuss expanding our partnership. Also, Bloomberg wants to do a feature on the consultant who said no." "Interested," I typed back. "Yes to dinner. Maybe to Bloomberg. Depends if they'll use my name." She responded immediately. "As if you'd accept anything else now." 10 years. That's how long I'd accepted invisibility as the price of stability. But it turned out visibility wasn't something granted by others. It was something you claimed for yourself. I walked toward my car, past the coffee shop where I'd written my first independent proposal, past the park where I'd taken calls with Granix while sick from Redwell. Every corner of this neighborhood held a small rebellion, a tiny act of professional self-determination. My phone rang, an unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Another company, another strategist tired of being furniture, another possibility. "Monroe Strategic Consulting," I answered. "This is Claire." My name, my company, my voice. After a decade of silence, it still felt like revolution. 10 years is long enough to build a prison. Turns out, one day is all you need to walk free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Claire's position? Let's discuss in the comments.